Welcome to the 5th Global Corporate Sustainability Forum, GCSF, organized by the Alliance for Sustainable Development Goals and hosted by the TASE. Right at this moment, members of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, are also having the 27th Conference of Parties, COP27, in Egypt. The whole world is searching for the pathway to net zero emission. As a collaborative hub, GCSF is dedicated to confronting the daunting challenge on the road to a comprehensive net zero transition. Taking Road to Net Zero as its theme, the forum is a platform not only connects Taiwanese domestic industries with international community, but also the public and private sectors, industrial supply chains, academic community, and the general public. For the first time, this forum will be held over 3 consecutive days. In addition to the joint awards ceremony for Global Corporate Sustainability Awards and the Taiwan Corporate Sustainability Awards, 20 domestic and foreign entities with outstanding performances in net zero actions have been invited to GCSF. These organizations, ranging from the industry to academia to NGO, will share their successful practices and visions for the future in a series of summits and workshops. Moreover, there will be a live stream session on November 18th, featuring the concurrent COP27 in Egypt. As recent climate disasters and their devastation bears witness, 2022 is a pivotal year for climate change and sustainable developments. Each of us, regardless who and where we are, we must prepare and commit ourselves on the road to net zero. The online seminar today gathers exceptional speakers from the world-renowned asset management corporations and corporate sustainability consultancy, with Mr. Martin Söderberg, the Industry Relations Manager from TCO Development Asia Office, as a seminar host. Please join with us in 2022 GCSF. Well, the rich and inspirational contents are ready for you. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Ambassador Chien, and thank you very much to the Taiwan Institute for Sustainable Energy for letting me host this webinar session. This session is titled Strive Towards Sustainable Development. My name is Martin Söderberg, and I work for an organization called TCO Development. And Strive Towards Sustainable Development is exactly what we do at TCO Development through our certification, TCO Certified. We try to push the IT industry to become more sustainable. And we still have a long way to go before IT products are fully sustainable, but we keep on striving towards sustainable development. And I think that striving towards sustainable development is something that we all must do, because the alternative, well, is not really an alternative. The world has procrastinated this question long enough, and we all need to take those steps towards a sustainable development. And whether you're in the financial sector or in construction, or if you're a farmer or just a regular citizen, we all have a role to play. And remember that the clock is ticking. We are getting closer to 2030 when the Sustainable Development Goals are supposed to be met. In today's webinar session, we'll get some interesting tips and different perspectives on how companies can work towards becoming more sustainable. We have 4 excellent speakers lined up for you. First off is Ms. Chitra Hepburn from MSCI. Second speaker is Rajesh Chhabara from CSRWorks International. Our third speaker is Trista Bridges from Read the Air. And our fourth speaker will be Fatima Hadj from HSBC. And they'll be speaking approximately 10 minutes on various topics that relate to sustainability. And I'm sure you're going to find this interesting. So our first speaker for today is Chitra Hepburn from MSCI. Chitra is the head of ESG and climate for the APAC region in MSCI. She's based out of Singapore, and she has a long experience from investment banking, particularly within project financing within the green energy sector. She's worked with clean tech investments in China and also corporate development and ESG. She's lived and worked in 10 different countries across the APAC region and also in Europe. And Chitra holds a Master of Science in Environmental Economics from the London School of Economics. So please welcome Ms. Chitra Hepburn.
Good afternoon. I'm Chitra Hepburn, Head of ESG and Climate Business in APAC for MSCI. Thank you, Taiwan Institute for Sustainable Energy, for inviting me to speak here. Over the last decade, ESG has gone from fringe to mainstream. And there's been so much development of late that I had a hard time figuring out how to distill what I wanted to share with you today. Because investors and corporations have seen increased regulations, demand for transparency, and a quest for standards. And they recognize that ESG ratings tools help provide valuable investment information and assess progress towards challenges like climate change. So measurement is essential. And as the already apparent effects of climate change dominate investment concerns, all the more so. From public equities to private debt, the transition to the net zero economy has the potential to impact every financial asset. As investors integrate these truths into their decision-making, an important question remains unanswered. So which of today's emerging issues could become tomorrow's systemic risks? And this is what I'm going to focus on today. So there's 2 key themes that we've seen emerge in Asia Pacific over the last year. So firstly, one of them happens to be the rise in ESG and climate regulations across the countries in APAC, which are not all the same. And the second is the need for new types of data for this sudden surge in demand when it comes to reporting or then transparency to analyze these financial risks and opportunities that climate change presents. So first, let me dive into the regulatory aspects across APAC. So we've always joked around the alphabet soup of sustainable investing standards, so many acronyms that are quite confusing to start with. And now we have a whole new slew of them, whether it's DCFD, SFDR, or more recently, NGFS. So with at least 34 regulatory bodies and standard setters in 12 markets undertaking official consultations in ESG. This was just in 2021 alone. It's no wonder that companies and investors' heads are spinning. So how do we make sense of this flood of new mandates and proposals? Are we finally reaching some consensus on definitions and standards? Well, yes and no. So while we see a convergence in some core areas, there are signs of further fragmentation, if you like, or rather customization in each of these markets, depending on which region they're in, and they're also being driven by different national priorities. So overall, the awareness of ESG issues has been on a very steep journey, and in APAC in particular, and it's been driven by a growing interest from community and government coupled with increased client interest and demand. So as a result, this region has seen increased flows into ESG, climate, and other sustainability or ESG-orientated funds. So ESG-themed equity funds domiciled in Asia Pacific had nearly US dollars 190 billion in assets under management at the end of 2021. And that's up by almost 40% from 2020. So that's been a huge leap upwards. This increase in investment flows has also brought about a heightened regulatory focus. Understandably, the regulators have had to step up and look at what they can do to provide better framework and guidance to their markets. So there have been many ESG frameworks that have been developed, and different stakeholders have stepped up to this challenge. So the first category that we found was the emerging ESG fund disclosure regulation. And this mandates, to some degree, disclosures that back up claims made by sustainable investment products. And of course, the objective is also to prevent greenwashing. In turn, these fund disclosure regulations are also likely to drive increased adoption of sustainable finance taxonomies, and they're all being developed or expanded to encompass a broader range of financial instruments. So as ESG investment becomes more prominent, the level and degree of ESG credentials associated with the financial products, they are diverging, increasing, but definitely diverging. So these regulatory frameworks are designed to provide guidance for not just for transparency, but then to reduce the risk of greenwashing. Overall, for APAC, we see clear benefits to increased regulation. There's always been a call for a little bit more reporting, more disclosure, so investors have more choice when they look at constituents coming out of Asia Pacific. So the increased corporate ESG disclosure across these markets is actually in line with, or in some cases, I would say, exceeding what we see in the United States. Yet our challenge in Asia Pacific, in each country, is that it doesn't come under one regulated body like the European Union, and each country is developing its own set of regulations. So the rules are not entirely uniform, and they may not be clear to all investors. However, if we were to look at an offset to this, we're seeing an increasing attempt to harmonize with best practice as we see it across the globe. And sometimes these frameworks and regulators that are responsible, they cite elements of the European Union Action Plan or more broadly accepted frameworks, such as the TCFD alignment or the PCAF, Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. This has an increased impact on the sophistication in reporting, and companies are not only reporting on their climate-related risks and opportunities, but they're also increasingly examining their resilience or their climate strategy under different climate-related scenarios and disclosing the processes through which they manage those climate risks. So we do see climate leading the way, particularly of late. So overall, if we were to look at the ESG data disclosures across Asia Pacific, then the recent studies that we've looked at are that all of these countries, or many of these countries, are just below what we would see, say, in the EU a few years ago. So if I were to give some examples, many of these markets have put greater disclosure, consistency, and transparency. If we look at Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, for example, they tend to be more aligned with the TCFD. If I look at Japan or Taiwan, then we see that it's more a sustainability reporting and stewardship code-based regulatory guidance. China has also made a lot of progress, especially in environmental reporting requirements, such as releasing the Environmental Information Disclosure Guideline for financial institutions. And India's Securities and Exchange Board, the SEBI, has also had ongoing consultations on ESG regulations that are picking up pace. So according to our research, when it comes to climate and climate data availability, owing either to regulators or then stock exchange requirements, some of these emerging markets in Asia Pacific are a lot better in reporting than we might imagine. So if you look at scope 1, 2, and 3, what we can see is, for example, Hong Kong has about 70% of reported data. So out of their issuers or listed companies, that 70% of them are disclosing this data. The Philippines has a very high percentage as well, around 64%. And then you've got Taiwan, Australia, Japan, and Malaysia, all between 45 to 50% in terms of disclosure. While the US sits at about 29%, if you're looking at, again, the scope 1, 2, and 3 that we've examined. So to set a baseline for this transition to net zero, financial institutions need to understand, firstly, the emissions of their total portfolio across their asset classes that they invest in, including the financed emissions. And so I just spoke about the listed entities, but what investors now need is new types of data that analyze financial risks and opportunities across all asset classes, and they look at what are those risks and opportunities that climate change presents. So to enable a holistic understanding of these climate-related risks and opportunities, they need to have the full scope 3 emissions as well as key facility locations of all listed companies. To help financial institutions align with the Paris Agreement, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, or PCAF, has been developing a transparent and consistent methodology to report the financed emissions of investment portfolios. So this carbon footprinting across multi-asset class portfolios allows investors to measure and manage financed emissions on their road to net zero emissions. Comparing financed emissions of the different asset classes, sectors, and project types can inform decarbonization decisions a lot easier. Under the umbrella of PCAF, financial institutions globally are working on a financed emissions disclosure standard. It's based on accounting rules and in line with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is a global standard for emissions footprints. Following the General Financed Emissions Attribution Principle, financial institutions account for their financed emissions from the annual emissions of the company or project that they finance, proportional to their share of investment in that company or project. So PCAF recommends the disclosure of scope 1 and 2 emissions across all sectors and separate disclosure of scope 3 emissions for selected sectors. So although the quality of climate-related data reported by issuers is constantly improving, there's less than 40% of companies in our MSCI ACWI Investable Market Index, which is the ACWI IMI, that disclosed scope 1 and 2 emissions, and fewer than 25% disclosed scope 3 as of the beginning of this year. So transparency about data quality is obviously key, but here the quantity also does matter. But financed emissions, they provide the foundation to set and track net zero commitments, and they also help to identify climate risk drivers in the portfolio across asset classes, sectors, and geographies. So measuring the total financed emissions of financial institutions' broad investment portfolios is truly an important step towards managing the net zero journey. And greater transparency into emission intensities across all those asset classes that previously were not possible. This helps investors identify opportunities for guiding the decarbonization of their investments and ultimately the economy. So I'd like to summarize. It's been a very busy and active time for all investors in this space, catching up with regulatory demands as well as their own net zero objectives and their data requirements. And this season and the year end will bring together all the key players in this ecosystem on the global stage at COP27, COP15, PRI in person, and many other such conferences that seek to solve this global grand challenge. So in the fast evolving space, there's a lot more to come, and I trust that your conference will shed more light on the journey that the ecosystem is on. Thank you.
中华电信蝉联5年行动网速 No.1， 舞动精彩，共创未来，
永远走在最前面。中华电信。
Future 可以说是人类唯一的目标，所有做的事情一定要对未来好，而绝对不是为现在好。
大家好，我是勤业众信联合会计师事务所永续发展服务负责人陈盈洲。世界经济论坛将气候行动失败列为首要的风险以及威胁，世界各国的政府也纷纷制定相关的政策，迈向近零的一个目标。在此，也欢迎各位参加第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛。勤业众信将举办台湾 ESG Forum， 迈向近零，共创去碳与生态圈，期待在会场里面跟各位见面。
大家好，我是 MSCI ESG 与气候研究部亚太区主管王小舒，很高兴能够支持第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛 Road to Net Zero。11月17日，我会跟大家探讨亚太区 ESG 趋势引领者以及最新永续议题。立刻报名，一起减碳爱地球，迈向净零之路。
Welcome back, and thank you very much, Chitra, for that presentation. I gather from your presentation that there's a lot of will from investors to move towards a decarbonized economy, but then there's a need for data and perhaps harmonized regulations. And I would guess that's the more difficult part to achieve. Our next speaker is Mr. Rajesh Chhabara. He is also based in Singapore. He is the managing director of CSRWorks International. He has over 20 years of international experience in different industries. His sustainability strategies have helped clients and win global rankings and recognitions. He conducts a wide range of sustainability training courses across the region. Rajesh is also the founder of several thought leadership programs, including the Asia Sustainability Reporting Awards, the Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit, and Asia's Top Sustainability Superwomen. He is also the editorial director of Sustainability Reporting, Learn from Asia's Best, an annual publication featuring Asia's best sustainability reports. He has also written a book on supply chain responsibility and co-authored 2 books on sustainability case studies. Rajesh is a regular speaker at international sustainability conferences. And I remember meeting Rajesh here in Taipei a few years ago. I believe it was in 2019. Then he was the moderator and I was the invited speaker. But now our roles are switched. So I would like you to welcome Rajesh Chhabara from CSRWorks International.
Greetings from Singapore. I'm Rajesh Chhabara, Managing Director at CSRWorks International. Thank you, Ambassador Eugene Chien, for inviting me to speak at this year's GCSF webinar. I'm going to share some best practice examples in SDG reporting. Let me quickly introduce CSRWorks. CSRWorks is a sustainability services firm in Singapore with an international footprint in consulting, training, and thought leadership. We work very closely with several partners to advance sustainability internationally. And our thought leadership initiatives include Asia Sustainability Reporting Awards, Asia Integrated Reporting Awards, Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit, and Asia's Top Sustainability Superwomen. Many companies from Taiwan participate in our awards every year. So a big thank you to all of you. So the question is, how do you produce a best-in-class award-winning SDG report? In my view, there are 6 indicators of an exceptional SDG report. And here are those 6 indicators. Number 1, whether there is evidence that the top leadership is committed to the SDGs. Number 2, whether SDGs are included in business strategy or sustainability strategy. Number 3, whether SDGs are aligned with the company's ESG priorities. And number 4, whether the company goes beyond the 17 goals and examines the 169 SDG targets and also additionally SDG indicators for reporting. Number 5 is whether has the company set time-bound targets to support the SDGs. And finally, number 6, whether the company reports its progress against these targets. So I'm going to share some award-winning SDG reports as examples for each of these 6 indicators. So let's go to those examples. My first example is SoftBank Corp, a Japanese company, which was the gold winner for SDG reporting last year. And in this report, if you look at their CEO's statement, the CEO's statement in their sustainability report mentions how important the SDGs are for their business growth. This is an excellent example of a commitment to the SDGs from the top. And in their report, throughout the report, then they explain that how SDGs are integrated, what goals they have set, what targets they have set, what has been their performance. And I'll share in some more pages from their report as we proceed with this presentation. My next example is Cathay Financial Holdings, your very own company in Taiwan, and the silver winner for SDG reporting last year. Cathay Financial Holdings report explains how its sustainability strategy also delivers on the SDGs and how the SDGs are closely linked with their priorities and their overall strategy. My next example again is from SoftBank, which very nicely explains how SDGs, so here is this is the page. So my next example is again from SoftBank, which very nicely explains how SDGs are integrated into its strategy and also materiality. And here on the next page, then you also see how SoftBank has mapped all 169 SDG targets over their material topics and also linked them with different reporting standards that they use for their reporting. So this is really a very comprehensive mapping of the SDGs at the target level. And now my next example again is from Taiwan, Anshin Food Services, the gold winner for SDG reporting in 2020. And in this report, they identify the SDG targets going to the target level and the company plans for each target and the results for that particular year. So that's very impressive. And finally, another example here from Safaricom, a company in Kenya. Now, this report explains how it contributes to the SDG targets it has adopted. So it's a very detailed, very comprehensive, but at the same time, in a very concise manner, They explain how they contribute to SDGs through different projects and which targets are being supported by their different projects and programs. Now, this example is from CDL, a real estate company in Singapore, which is an excellent example of transparent reporting of targets and performance. So they very clearly disclose what the target was, what over different time horizon, and where they are currently, and what has been their performance against the targets. Now, this is my final example from a global company, AP Moller. Now, this is another very good example of transparent reporting of the company targets and its performance. So if you notice here, in this case, the company has only partially met the target. However, they are being very honest and disclosing here that they have met this target only partially. So that's another very authentic, very credible way of reporting progress on the SDGs by a company. So I hope you found these examples useful. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Very good hands-on tips for all of you working with ESG reporting. Our next speaker is Ms. Trista Bridges. Trista is the principal and co-founder of the organization Read the Air. She's a highly regarded senior advisor with extensive experience in strategy execution topics ranging from international business development, organizational training, and development to corporate strategy. Trista has worked across a broad spectrum of industries, including life sciences, fast-moving consumer goods, digital technology, and financial services, and geographics from Europe to the Americas to Asia. Trista is a firm believer in the importance of incorporating sustainability in business strategies and operations, an area of increasing focus for her clients. Trista holds an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University, and a BSc from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Trista will be talking about moving from commitment to action. The commitment to work with sustainability is, of course, important, but honestly, a bit meaningless if it's not turned into action. So please welcome Ms. Trista Bridges, who will share her thoughts with us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Trista Bridges. I'm principal and co-founder of an organization called Read the Air. And I'm going to talk to you today about what's next for sustainability, which is namely moving from commitments to action. I think one of the things that I would like to start with is telling you a little bit about what we do at Read the Air. So we do essentially three things. We work with organizations around sustainability strategy, ESG solutions, and also organizational change. And so what this means is that we aim to bring organizational transformation to businesses, working again around strategy, business sustainability awareness and training, business intelligence. And we also do a lot of work around thought leadership. And that is namely leadership development programs with executives, but also developing content that helps the business world make this transition to sustainability. And of course, this helps us achieve impact for businesses around the world. Before we start talking about going from commitments to action, we really need to take a look at where are we trying to go? What is our end goal? And to do that, we need to look back a little bit around how organizations have dealt with social and environmental issues in the past. And where this story starts is essentially with corporate philanthropy. Now, when we look at corporate philanthropy, what is it? How did it work? Basically, these were activities where organizations would contribute to society in some way, supporting organizations around the world, often NGOs, but they were auxiliary to business activities. Foundations, which many organizations started to develop, were really the foundation of delivering the support. However, the support was really conditional upon the company's financial performance. So that means if the company didn't do well, often these activities got reduced or cut. Next, we moved into the era of corporate social responsibility. And corporate social responsibility was a bit different. It was aligned a little bit more around the business's activities a little more. So you tend to see businesses supporting things that align more with what they do. However, it was focused a little bit more around shaping the opinion of government, for example, or local officials or particular key stakeholders. We tended to see more of a focus on compliance. So rules started to be passed around what organizations had to do around social issues in many places around the world. And the focus was really on complying with those laws. And then we saw that the responsibility for these activities sat with what became CSR departments, sometimes communications or government affairs teams. However, these two activities, I should say, we look at them as business as usual, so your general activities, funding these, okay? So we make money as an organization and we can do these activities. However, what we're trying to get to is something that looks more like this. So that means sustainable business. So this is forward-looking, it puts people, profit, and planet on an equal plane. It forces us to look at the entire value chain, not just our business and our activities. And business and strategy and operations really become more of the focus. So we look at how can we retool our business model to be sustainable. And what this is this business as usual is this, right? So even if an organization is not doing well financially for a particular period of time, it doesn't necessarily cut sustainability activities because it's really embedded in what they do. And this is where companies' ambitions are focused at the moment. Now, what we have at Redian, what we've developed is something we call the 5 steps to a sustainable business model. And what this is essentially the levels that an organization goes through to get to a fully sustainable business. So we start obviously with step 1, business level understanding. People are interested in the topic and they start to learn about it. At step 2, we see the C-level suite, the leaders of the organization really setting goals. And this is kind of where many organizations are at today, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we start seeing some actions and first wins, which is important, but somewhat limited in terms of its effect on the organization internally and externally. Then we start to see more active integration. So we see cross-organizational priority setting and buy-in. And then we get to step 5, which is really the step that organizations are trying to get to, this sustainable business, fully sustainable business step that I mentioned earlier. And so what does this mean? This means that sustainability strategy equals business strategy. It means that there's a clear action plan to support this strategy with deliverables. We start seeing a common platform that is understood and executed on across the organization. We see new KPIs emerging to help us track performance, and even things like performance systems are aligned around this and how people are compensated. And we have technologies and processes that really help us get there and help us manage this on an ongoing basis. However, where the majority of companies are today is step 2 and 3. So we have a lot more work that we need to do. So what could this look like if an organization kind of got closer to step 5, as I mentioned? I want to talk a little bit about an organization, a company called Schneider Electric, which many of you may know. It's an energy management company, an engineering services company. And they really have been at the forefront of really working to embed this in what they do. So one of the things that they developed is called the Schneider Sustainability Impact Score. And what it does is it tracks their quarterly performance and progress around what they have here are 11 plus 1 different metrics and different goals, if you will. And I want to kind of draw your attention to a couple things. Firstly, number 1, grow our green revenues to 80%. What this means is they're really looking to drive their business performance and growth with sustainable type products and services, right? So not just their organization being more sustainable, but also helping other organizations be so. They also are really aiming to move execution of this beyond the sustainability department. And so what they've done is, first of all, in the first instance, their head of sustainability or chief sustainability officer is also the chief strategy officer. So what we call a CSSO. This is quite unique because most organizations are not quite there yet, but that means that they really feel that it's a key strategic issue for their organization and needs to be aligned with what they do as a business. They also integrate or involve other departments, obviously, in delivering these initiatives. So we see on the right-hand side, the first one would really focus on commercial and finance driving that. Other areas we might see R&D and innovation. And what this does is it brings more departments and functions into this topic, unlike has ever happened with organizations before. So if you look at Schneider Electric's performance, their sustainability strategy has actually been a real driver of their growth. And they've also been recognized around the world as a real leader on this topic. So firstly, in 2021, the ranking of Corporate Knights actually is an organization that ranks companies along their sustainability performance around the world. And Schneider Electric achieved the #1 slot on the list last year, which is a real, I think it really recognizes the progress and the success that they've had around this particular topic. If you look at their performance, however, financially, it's continued to show healthy performance. And so what we see on the top left-hand side of the chart is we see that they've shown steady growth, and they're also looking to continue that growth trend in the future. And on the right-hand side of the chart, we see a chart that's actually very important. They've shown revenue growth, they've shown profitability growth in the midst of a very, very difficult financial environment. This chart is actually from this year, 2020, their first half performance, and they've managed to continue to do well, which is very encouraging. And the market is also recognizing this as well, and that means not just shareholders and investors, but also analysts who very much are influencers of investors' actions. And actually, what these analysts see is that they see there's a better mix of growth, profitability, debt, health, and visibility. And by that we mean transparency than 70% of companies globally. And that's actually a really encouraging sign that the analysts are seeing that this type of strategy can really be successful and important for companies. And then lastly, at the bottom, we see that analysts have put a consensus buy on their stock, which shows that they're really being rewarded for the performance that they've had around this topic and their coherence around sustainability and how much it aligns with their strategy as a business. Now, I think what we want to talk about next is how do we accelerate change? And I just want to move into kind of giving you some steps and some advice around how you can do that. Now, the first thing is resourcing means commitment, right? So many organizations and businesses aren't necessarily putting their money where their mouth is, if you will. So they're making commitments, but they're not properly putting people and money around achieving those commitments. This is extremely important to do and something that we want to encourage our organizations to really step up and start to align how they allocate their resources with their sustainability objectives. Next, benchmarking. Many organizations don't actually think about what their competitors are doing around this topic. And this is a really important point because if you look at strategy or if you look at marketing or those types of functions, organizations benchmark all the time. We're encouraging organizations to do this also around sustainability initiatives so that they can ensure they understand where they're at and also understand where they need to go. Next, really stay current on the regulatory landscape. This is very complicated and complex for many businesses, but really important that they think about where governments are going on this and ensuring that they can respond to the growing requirements that are going to be in place. Next, make or buy. And what this means is really think about whether you need to develop your sustainability services or products or competency internally, or if you should partner or even do joint ventures or acquisitions to be able to bring in that competency or those products and services into your businesses. We wanted to really talk about this because the market in which I'm based in Japan, this is a question that comes up a lot actually, because Japanese companies tend to like to invest very heavily in internal R&D. But I think the next phase of this, because many organizations are not accustomed to delivering sustainability products and services, is going to be really looking externally to get help to be able to kind of advance their initiatives. And then I would also say the last kind of key point of advice is digital transformation is really key to measurement and management of this. So these are two dynamics that are happening pretty much in parallel, particularly in Asia, where we're seeing a fast move towards digital transformation and really getting there. But we can't have measurement of our sustainability initiatives over time without this. So these two phenomena really go hand in hand. So it's important to accelerate both at the same time. And this can be a little difficult, I think, for businesses, but it's really integral to ensuring that we can measure our success. And then lastly, I would say, I wanted to leave you with the point of don't forget social and governance. Many organizations are focusing very much on environmental goals and targets, net zero, et cetera, extremely important. However, it's important to note that it's impossible to get there without social initiatives and directly around your employees and also the communities in which you operate, but also governance. How you govern yourself as an organization, your structure, what your board looks like, all of these types of things are extremely important to ensure proper governance around various initiatives dealing with sustainability. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
我是资诚 PwC 台湾的李怡桦会计师，同时也是资诚永续发展服务公司的董事长。第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛即将于11月16号展开。今年的主题是 Road to Net Zero， 欢迎大家踊跃报名，与资诚一起实践净零排放，共创永续影响力。
大家好，我是台新金控首席经济学家暨企业永续办公室主任李振宇。台湾净零排放协会举办的第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛呢，即将于2022年11月17日登场。我将从经济学家的角度来跟各位分享碳权趋势与碳钱时代，欢迎马上报名，一起做回碳大钱，迎接碳权新时代，与我们共同迈向净零的永续未来 ，Road to Net Zero。
Welcome back, and thank you very much, Trista, for that presentation. Very good to see some examples of how sustainable practices can also turn into financial growth. Our last speaker for this session is Ms. Fatima Hadj, who is HSBC's Head of Climate. She has over 20 years experience in scaling businesses across financial services and in supporting businesses to consider ESG factors from a risk and impact perspective. Fatima has held a number of senior roles in the banking and asset management industry, including at Taco Capital, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's. She has also been the chair of principals for the Responsible Investments Committee, PRI, for ESG integration. She is also a member of the steering committee of the new collaboration between PRI and the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative on bank loans and related products. She is also a lecturer at the Bocconi University on ESG integration in finance. So please welcome Ms. Fatima Hadj.
ESG is a word under construction with multidimensional aspects in a geopolitical situation characterized by its high degree of uncertainty. A word under construction is also a word we can influence. Today, I will share with you some of my key beliefs for how to secure a successful transition towards net zero. I will present 3 points. The first one, how regulation will impact all sectors. The second one, how we can capture uncertainty via methodology. The third one, how technology and qualitative approach can help all of us. And I will conclude with a specific focus on the S and the G of the ESG world. Let's start with the first point, the regulation. Financial services firms are increasingly facing regulatory, investors, social political pressures to incorporate sustainability into their businesses. They have to make strategic commitments to enable the transition towards a net zero economy. Within the asset management, regulation can help to align ESG incentive for fund managers to drive real-world change, rather than just focusing on financial ESG risk management. Regulation is also a challenge as there is no harmonization and the pace of the policy response depends on where you are. So regulation is an opportunity and a challenge. The second point to keep in mind is how we can capture uncertainty via methodology. A combination of both long and short-term approaches enables the capturing of uncertainty and global challenges. To define short-term milestones, we must start thinking about long-term trends. Those long-term trends are being shaped by policy developments, especially in some sectors like energy, transport, agriculture, or infrastructure. Thinking about these trends will help us to better prepare for future market challenges, but also for future market opportunities. Investors and asset managers should have a plan to help companies transition to a net zero business model. This involves actively engaging with investors and investees. So to capture uncertainty, let's identify the long-term trends and define short-term plans. The third point is related to technology and qualitative approach. Understanding technology and feeding this into our investment process is vital. We believe in developing tools for investors to assess non-standard data. These tools will have the ability to capture a massive amount of data. Secondly, to process the data rapidly and to analyze it to find new correlations and new trends. However, technology will never replace human judgment. In areas such as risk assessment, the qualitative review is as important as the quantitative result. As a conclusion, I would like to underline the social and the governance factors. Incorporating social and governance factors into the investment process is necessary for the net zero transition. In responsible investment, the S and the G component of the ESG world can sometimes seem forgotten or underestimated. Most effort is put into reducing the carbon footprint, which is good, but it's worth underlining that the assessment of environmental impacts without assessment of social factors and governance will lead to unsustainable results in the long run. Underweighting the social dimension of the responsible investment agenda is a misunderstanding of ESG goal of building a more sustainable, inclusive, and fairer society. As a conclusion, I will urge you to keep in mind, sustainability is not something you measure. Sustainability is something you assess.
Thank you very much for listening to this session titled Strive Towards Sustainable Development. We've been listening to 4 distinguished speakers today. First off was Ms. Chitra Hepburn from MSCI, who talked about how investors are working on decarbonizing their investments, which leads to more sustainable business practices, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Second speaker was Mr. Rajesh Chhabara from CSRWorks International. He gave us some examples of best practices when it comes to ESG reporting. Very inspirational for those of you who work with ESG reporting. And our third speaker was Ms. Trista Bridges from Read the Air, giving us some useful practical tips on how to get organizations to incorporate sustainability into their core business. And last but not least, we heard from Ms. Fatima Hadj from HSBC, who shared with us her views on sustainability. And on behalf of TICE, I would like to thank you all for listening to this session, and I hope we can meet in person in Taipei next year at the GCSF 2023. Until then, thank you very much and goodbye.
我是台湾净零排放协会秘书长马小康。第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛将于2022年11月16号到18号登场。3天活动内容丰富，邀请产官学界专家共襄盛举。欢迎大家马上来报名，与我们一起迈向净零排放未来 Road to Net Zero。
大家好，我是永志顾问股份有限公司的营运长严素娟 Dora。永志顾问呢，在碳资产管理领域呢，已经有20年的经历了。这次呢，我非常的荣幸能够参与台湾净零排放协会在2022年11月17号举办的第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛。我在当时呢，也会和大家一起交流，分享碳权达到碳中和这个议题哦。欢迎大家一起报名，让我们迈向净零排放的未来。谢谢。
Hello， 大家好，我是中兴大学刘婉玉，由台湾净零排放协会所举办的第5届 GCSF 全球企业永续论坛。碳权、碳关税与碳交易的主题即将于2022年11月17日正式的登场。那我自己也会以自然碳汇与碳权交易为主题来跟各位进行分享，欢迎大家马上报名，与我们一起迈向净零排放的未来。